clock, maybe 1:15 or so, and I get into my sleeping bag in one of the shelves. He's got two shelves, one on the left and the right in this pop-up trailer. Really nice setup for a good night's sleep. I put my machine on, and all the lights are turned out, of course. And I am hunkered into my sleeping bag, covered up to my nose, basically, trying to stay warm and kind of enjoying being able to sleep and get a good night's sleep. When all of a sudden, at about, well, a couple hours later, what happens is I wake up because my CPAP machine stops working. What happens is, typically, is that when the battery dies on the power of my CPAP machine, it'll just stop and the pressure will stop and it'll wake me up. And gosh, I was a little disappointed because I thought I was going to be able to get a couple of great hours of sleep, if not maybe all night long. And supposedly the battery died. When I woke up, I looked at my watch, which was underneath my sleeping bag at the time, totally in the dark. There was no lights on inside the pop-up trailer, and I noticed my watch was glowing brightly on my wrist, which has, as you mentioned, Gary, these fluorescent little spots around the numbers on the dial. And I could very clearly tell that it was 3:30 in the morning. And so I decided, well, okay, that's about as much sleep as I'm going to get. So I might as well get up and go to the bathroom. And when I was getting up to put my shoes on to go out, I woke up Kevin, who was in the other side of the trailer. And he goes, oh, he says, what happened? And I said, oh, it looks like the battery died on the CPAP. I'm going to go to the restroom. I'll come back. And he says, okay, well, don't worry. By the time you get back, I will change over the battery to another battery that I have as a backup so you can sleep for the rest of the night. And I was relieved at that point. I'm thinking, oh, thank heavens I can actually, go and relieve myself, real quickly and come back and catch some more hours of sleep in the nice warm pop-up trailer. So I leave the trailer and just literally walk 10 paces off to the side and behind the pop-up trailer with this beautiful little tent that he's got set up that you can stand up in and relieve yourself. And it was just, just going, number one, it's going to take me a minute, maybe 2 minutes at the most, to do that with my aging prostate. And I decided, okay, I'm going back in. I didn't mess around or go anywhere. I just went to the bathroom and came back into the pop-up trailer. When I came back into the trailer, Kevin was already back asleep again. It was dark in the pop-up trailer. And when I opened the door to come inside, he automatically woke up again and just casually asked me, what time is it? I said, well, I looked at my watch again. It was still glowing, and it said 4:30. I said, 4:30? And he goes, oh. So then I get back in the sleeping bag, and I go back to sleep. Now, that was pretty much the events of that night, but in the morning when we woke up, the next day, we all gathered around the fireplace, the campfire, started some breakfast, put the coffee pots on to boil the water, and kind of commiserating about, what was going on the night before, the fact that we didn't see a whole lot at the Skywatch that night, but that we were looking for another couple more days of expedition and research out there at Takalak Lake. And we're going to touch base, of course, with the folks on the mountain to see what happened to them last night and the Sasquatch people out there in the northwest side of the mountain. When all of a sudden Kevin started thinking around the campfire, I can see him right now holding his tin coffee cup and kind of like staring at the fire and telling me, he says, what time did you say you got up last night to go to the bathroom? And I said, well, I remember it was 3:30 because my watch was glowing very brightly and I could easily see the time. He says, that's what I thought you said. And he says, well, what time was it when you came back in? And I said, I can't really, well, wait, I think it was 4:30. And he said, yes, that's what you told me. It was 4:30 when you came back. And then we started, like, the light bulbs going on in our heads. Wait a minute. What happened with this hour of missing time that I thought only took 2 minutes to go outside to go to the bathroom and come back in? And the fact that Kevin had already turned the old battery onto a new battery on my CPAP machine was sound asleep again when I got back in the trailer. That was a little strange to think about as well.
I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, now, since this has happened, have you had any weird dreams, any weird memories, anything strange about that night that you can think of? I mean, anything. Have you had any weird dreams about aliens or being abducted? Anything? I mean, you said you were regressed. I mean, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, that hour, it doesn't take, my friend, an hour to go take a pee. I mean, come on, not when you just go right out the trailer and step into that little curtain thing, and then you go back in and go back to bed. An hour.
Well, and I'll tell you a little bit further here about what we think was maybe more missing time, not just an hour, even more than that. But to answer your question, Gary, I haven't really come up with any flashbacks or dreams about that incident at Takalak Lake. Although, under the regression that I had with Mary Kennedy, which was probably about a month ago, so it was maybe about a month and a half after the incident, there was some amazing things that came out underneath that regression that people can actually listen to the whole event if they want to go scroll down on the UFO I-Team Facebook page and listen to what came out. I basically, I'm just going to cut to the bottom line here on the regression, is that I basically come up with memories about being aboard a craft which was very low lit and kind of like misty inside, and actually not almost being abducted, but almost being cooperative with a small group of gray aliens. That's kind of basically the bottom line. Being examined on a table, the whole thing, but not being fearful and not being kind of like afraid that I was being abducted. It was almost as if there was some kind of a camaraderie going on there. They were just checking up on me or whatever. But to get back to the whole issue of, being a lawyer, even though a paranormal lawyer they call me nowadays, I still want to have some proof and scientific evidence that I can bring to a court of law that points to beyond a reasonable doubt, or at least preponderance of the evidence of what we're trying to say. So what I did after Kevin mentioned that around the campfire in the morning, I decided to go check the SD card on my CPAP machine, which is a very sophisticated computer, by the way. The CPAP machines have printouts of how long you used the machine, how many times you took your mask off in the middle of the night, what kind of sleep quality that you had during the night. And what I did when I found that out and downloaded it onto my iPhone, by the way, is it gives you a graph of how long I used the CPAP machine that night. And to my amazement and almost horror, I found out that I had only used my CPAP machine for an hour and 50 minutes that night.
Less than 2 hours.
Less than 2 hours. Now, the interesting thing is that it'll give me a printout for a week or a month or even a year in a graph form. And it's very dramatic to see that the night before and the whole week before, I'm sleeping 8 hours, 7 hours, sometimes 9 hours if I sleep in. The days and weeks after, I found out later on after the incident, I slept normal, but there's this giant dip in the graph on August 27th, 2018 at Takalak Lake, where I only used supposedly the CPAP machine for an hour and 50 minutes, which, for instance, kind of correlates to the first time that I went in to sleep with Kevin Beagle in the pop-up trailer, because we got there around, like I mentioned, 12:31. And then supposedly, if I'm sleeping for an hour and 50 minutes, about 2 hours, I'm waking up sometime around 3 or 3:30 in the morning, and it correlates for being about almost 2 hours of use for the CPAP machine. But the weird thing is I could have sworn I went right back to sleep, and my machine was working, and it didn't record any other usage for the rest of that night, only the hour and 50 minutes. And here was another strange event that happened with Kevin's battery that he used initially for the CPAP machine. He told me in the morning that even though he had switched the CPAP to a second battery, he says the first battery, he looked at it and it was just fine. It had at least a half charge left in the first battery, and for some reason, it quit. At least my CPAP machine quit that night.
Well, I got an answer for that. You were abducted. Come on. I mean, of anything, like Timothy Cullen, the same thing. He didn't remember, and he had no memory of being abducted, and it's the same thing with you. He had the lost time, but, it's the same with you. You have this weird amount of lost time, and everything points, my friend, that you were taken for a frickin' ride. And that is what's scary. Now, you need, for the listeners of anything else of your show and my show, you need to go get x-rays or whatever of that wrist and find out. I wish you had a compass right now, because I am dying to know if it's still showing anything. I mean, this is the most strange thing, the loss of time. And that machine is not going to, you're not going to, come on, you went back to bed, you probably virtually were up in space somewhere. And, the thing is, when they abduct you, from anybody I've ever talked to that's been abducted or said they have been abducted, they don't remember much. They don't. And that's what they do, is they take that out of your brain for you don't remember.
No, it's just a fantastic phenomena. You're right, Gary, because I have literally I'm an analytical kind of guy. I just, try to find out in my memory, in my investigations, all the facts that I possibly can. And I have no memory at all of anything that happened after I went back into that pop-up trailer to go back to sleep. But indeed, if there was only an hour and 50 minutes worth of use of my CPAP machine that night, and I didn't wake up again after 3 or 4:30, because the machine went off. And normally, here's another aspect. Normally, if I sleep without my CPAP machine at all for even an hour, I will wake up in the morning with the sorest throat ever. It's almost as if you have a massive cold coming on and you get that sore throat feeling because you snore, at least I do, without my CPAP machine. And your soft palate kind of like crunches down and cuts off the air getting into your system. And what happens is your brain runs out of oxygen and it wakes your body up all night long. So you're going through this cycle of snoring and waking up and snoring, and your throat just kills you in the morning. And I didn't have any of that effect that morning at all. Now, if indeed I only used my machine for an hour and 50 minutes, that means we've got multiple hours of missing time somehow. Not just 1 hour that I thought I went out to go to the bathroom. I'm talking, probably from 1:30 in the morning when I went to sleep till 7:30 in the morning when we actually remember waking up, Kevin and myself in the pop-up trailer. That's quite a bit of time that is unaccounted for.
Yeah, well, I just got a funny feeling you were abducted. Along with, it sounds like your friend Lee too. I think maybe you need to really pump him too and find out if he has any loss of time or any weird memories that he can't place. But that's what I find so interesting about you personally. That you're into the paranormal, and if anybody that is going to be abducted, they're going to take somebody who's more of a believer than a disbeliever. And especially since you've been, talking and created the UFO I-Team where you're trying to prove there's UFOs, your thought pattern is, naturally going to be about UFOs more than probably about sex. So you're going to be thinking about, aliens, UFOs, trying to prove if they exist or not. And that's one thing I like about your show on the network, besides mine. We're going to be talking a lot about UFOs. And that's where I hate to say it. Art Bell